I've been at Princess Margaret for 25 years. And each day, as was stated, I'm always inspired and encouraged. And the patients I work with always keep me looking at the research and looking at more information. So I'm never bored. So what I'm going to talk about today is more about diet, and I'm going to talk also about transfusion-related iron overload and diet, because many people think that they need to reduce the iron in their diet, and there's a lot of concern around that. When I was asked to do this presentation, I thought I would go back to the research and see what is out there. And really, there is no published research on the impact of total dietary intake on transfusion-related iron overload. So then the next thing you do is we look at hemochromatosis, and there's very little published research on its impact. So what does this mean? Well, if you look at the research collectively, the guidelines are very similar. And what I did was I compiled them here for you, and we can go through them one by one. So the diet recommendations, sounds boring, I know, but follow a well-balanced and varied diet. And I think we hear that terminology a lot, but what does that really mean? So we'll delve into that a little bit more. And I brought some Canada food guides that we'll look at as well. Within the well-balanced and varied diet, what we may want to do is limit the rich sources of iron. Consider food combinations. There are some food combinations can actually increase the absorption of iron, and some food combinations that can actually decrease the absorption of iron. So we'll talk about that. And then also a little bit about alcohol. The next part is the importance of following food safety guidelines. This is important because of our immune system is the main source for helping us fight infection, and food safety is part of what we need to know. I will also direct you to where you can find some more information about food safety guidelines and some of my favorite resources. And then use of vitamin and mineral supplements. Avoiding iron supplements and avoiding vitamin C supplements, and why that would be the case. Okay, so I really wanted to make the point that follow a well-balanced and varied diet, that iron loss through restrictive dieting is negligible in comparison to other treatments available. So it's really milligrams versus hundreds of milligrams. And I want to stress this point because I don't want people to become malnourished in their pursuit of removing iron from their diet completely. We need the foods that have iron in them for the protein that they have. They're the building blocks of every cell in the body. They also help with our muscles. And so we want to be careful in what we do. Also, we don't want to put our vitamins in our body off balance. So by decreasing the iron, it can affect some of the other vitamins in our body and minerals. Zinc and vitamin B12 are the ones that would be most affected if we reduced iron in the diet by a large amount. So what I thought we could do right now is look at the Canada's Food Guide, and we'll go through this a little bit. How many of you are familiar with this version? Okay, good. So it's been out there long enough. How many of you know the idea behind the rainbow and what that's supposed to depict? No, okay. So I wondered how well Health Canada was in providing that information. So the idea behind the rainbow is that you have the four different arches, and what your diet should contain most is the green arch, so the vegetables and fruit. So when you're looking at a well-balanced diet, the largest portion of your intake in the day should come from the fruits and vegetables. And then from the yellow part, your grains and your grain products, so your breads and cereals. And we're looking more at the whole grains. You may not realize this because it's very small, but the version prior to this had the breads and cereals as the outer arch and the fruits and vegetables as the next arch. So when you look at the research and you're looking at illnesses across the world, you do then reflect that into the Canada's Food Guide. And although every country has their own version, the bottom line is really quite similar. The blue line, it's a little smaller, so you don't need as much from here, but it's still a very important part of the diet. And that is your dairy and dairy alternates. So it's been expanded to say, no, it doesn't have to be just milk. It could be your dairy alternates that are in there as well. And then the smaller but important one is your red meats. Okay, so you have your red meats, your eggs, your tofu that fall into that category. If you open it up, what they've done now is they have also changed it in that the number of servings from each group is dependent on your gender as well as your age. And what's important to look at is what a serving size constitutes. So when this first came out, there was a lot of flack about the diet, about the guide saying, well, that's a lot of serving sizes that you're suggesting. But if you actually look at the sizes that are in this handout, you'll see that they can be quite small. So when it comes to eggs, we're talking about two eggs as a serving. When you're talking about yogurt, it's about 3/4 of a cup. When you're talking about vegetables, it's 1/2 a cup, and the same goes with some of the breads and cereals. The idea behind this is to make sure that you're getting the nutrients that you need through the well-balanced diet. And then, if you look at the last page, this talks about some additional information about what you need to have from each of the food groups. So having more of the dark green and orange and yellow vegetables. Half of the products from the grains should be whole grain. And milk, going for lower fat milk if weight is an issue. If you have trouble maintaining your weight, then it's okay to go with higher. And then with your meats and alternates, going for the more of the leaner meats. And then on the last page, a few more recommendations about what you need at every age. So for children, for women of childbearing age, and then men and women over 50, the need for vitamin D increases, and at this point it probably is a good idea to include a supplement in the diet for that. But always best to review that with the physician. On the bottom, it talks about how do I count food serving sizes in a meal. It gives you an idea for that. And I would really encourage you to go to the Health Canada website because you can actually create your own guide with your favorite fruits and vegetables and grain products, etc. So you can put in your gender, your age, your favorite fruits, vegetables, your favorite foods, and then it will generate a more specific guide for yourself. And you can also find information at the Health Canada website about food labeling, which we're also going to do a little not a workshop, but there's some products on your desk that we're going to look at a little bit further. So limiting rich food sources of iron. What does this mean? So are you familiar with heme iron and non-heme iron? No. Okay. So heme iron, it really refers to iron that comes from animal sources, and it is very easily absorbed by the body. And then your non-heme iron is from your plant sources, like your kidney beans, your lentils, and it's not as easily absorbed. So if you're someone who is vegetarian and you're following mostly a plant-based diet, you could probably take in more milligrams of iron, but because your body's not absorbing it as much, you're okay. What does this mean for us if we're looking at limiting rich sources of food, rich food sources of iron? It means that it's probably a good idea to have more of the non-heme sources and have less of the animal sources. And this is still in keeping with what we consider to be a healthier diet. So more and more research is talking about going to a plant-based diet anyway. So following this is healthier as well. So for your heme sources of iron, we're looking at organ meats, which is like your liver, red meats, beef, lamb, pork, veal, poultry, turkey, chicken, duck, and usually the darker color, the darker meat has higher iron, and fish and seafood. Now it's yellow. I use kind of the red light, green light thing. So have less often. It's caution. It doesn't mean remove it completely from the diet, but just maybe have it less often. So if you were potentially having it every day, I would say maybe cut it back to once a week and incorporate some more of your non-heme iron foods. And I wouldn't eliminate fish completely because it has some very good nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, so you might want to have that once a week. So that's what I mean. You're not eliminating it, you're just cutting back on it. With non-heme iron sources, dry peas and beans, lentils, soybeans. There are certain fruits and vegetables as asparagus and spinach. Someone had mentioned spinach earlier. Nuts and seeds, dried fruit, egg yolks, and whole grains. And please remember, these are not absorbed as easily as the ones with heme iron. So if one says it has 10 milligrams of iron, let's say in the red meat, and you see the same on the soybeans, well, you're probably absorbing only 50% of what's in the non-heme source. The next one, you've probably read about limiting enriched breads and pastas, fortified breakfast cereals, fortified sports drinks, and power bars. So if you fortify something, it means that you're adding vitamins and minerals to it that never existed in that food. If you're enriching something, it means that the vitamins and minerals or whatever has been removed and then put back in. So enriching is something that happens a lot when you're making white flour. Now we're using a lot more whole grain flours, but the process before was to have the enriched flours. So you would process it. That would remove the outer layer of the grain, but that would also remove the vitamins and minerals. And once it was processed, they would add it back in. So that's just a small difference between enriched and fortified. And all grain products in Canada by law are fortified with iron. And then with considering food combinations. So when you have a vitamin C rich food at the same time as an iron rich food, it actually increases the absorption of the iron into the body. Again, I'm not suggesting you avoid vitamin C rich foods completely, but you might want to consider separating it out. So if you were going to make a lentil soup, maybe you will not add tomato sauce to that lentil soup. You'll make it plain. And then if you want to have a vitamin C rich food like an orange, you would have it more as a snack, but you won't have it at the same meal. Same with breakfast. If you're having your cereal, which you already know has iron in it, maybe you would not add some strawberries to the cereal, but you can have your strawberries later. You may not have it on the cereal, but you might have it as a snack later. Now, tea has certain phytonutrients in it that actually would decrease the absorption of iron. So this isn't to say that you could use it as a way as a drug of choice for cutting back on iron, but it's just a nice little trick to know that if you're having tea at your meal, you can actually, the iron absorbed is decreased a little bit. Okay? So that's just some food synergies to be aware of. Avoid or limit alcohol consumption. I don't really have much to say about this except avoid or limit. Some wines are actually higher in iron, and if you have any damage to the liver, it's best to avoid it completely. And what I included is what is the equivalent of one drink. So that would be a 12-ounce beer, or a 5-ounce wine, or a 1.5 ounce of liquor. Okay, so all those are considered the same. So if you're limiting and you're looking for quantity, I guess you'd go for the beer. If you still wanted to have some in your diet, but not a lot. So the next part I wanted to do was go through the nutrition information on food labels, how to make better choices. So again, you can actually go on to Health Canada's website. So I've taken this presentation from Health Canada and I've added a twist to it for our presentation today. So percent daily value is what is being used quite a bit now to help us understand our diet and the nutrients we're taking in from our food. So along with the ingredient list, you also have a nutrition facts label, and on that label you have the percent daily value. What's important to keep in mind is what's circled here is that you want to look at the serving size. And you want to compare that serving size to what you're actually eating, right? To make sure that the numbers on that nutrition fact sheet are correct. So for this, we have a yogurt, and it says that the nutrition fact label is 3/4 cup. And we're lucky with yogurt on this one because vitamin C and iron are at 0%. But let's say we were looking at calories, and here it says 160 calories. If you eat a full cup of yogurt, it'll actually be a lot more calories, and it'll be a lot more fat and a lot more protein. So there's some math involved between what's on the label and the amount that you consume. Now, another little trick is how to understand the percent daily value. So if you do see a dietitian, or I don't know if the personal trainer went into this, 5% daily value or less is considered little. There's not that much of that food in it, that nutrient in it. 15% of daily value or more is considered a lot. Now, this is just a rule of thumb that you can use when you're looking at your information. What I think is most helpful is if you're comparing two products. So if you're in the store and determining which product do I want to get, this will help you with which one is the better choice. Looking at this one, we already looked at it, it's 0 for vitamin C and 0 for iron. So if we go on to cereal, for this cereal, the portion size is 1/2 cup, and in that 1/2 cup, it has 30% of the iron that you require for the day. So the percent daily value is referring to your daily intake. So you would get 1/3 of the iron you would need in that 1/2 cup. If you're like me and you usually have a full cup at breakfast, then I'd be getting 60% of my iron needs. But the good thing is that there's no vitamin C in this, so that's not going to increase that absorption. With these crackers, we have that it's 6% iron. So it's a little above the 5%, but it means it doesn't have a lot of iron in it for 4 crackers though. So remember to keep that in mind. So if you're having 8 crackers, or if you're having double that, that means you have more iron in the product. With this one is a low sodium vegetable juice, and with this you can see that you're getting 100% of your vitamin C with that juice, and this is in a full cup. Okay, so like we said earlier, if you're having iron at your meal, you may want to separate out the foods or fluids that have a higher amount of vitamin C. So you don't have to eliminate it, just don't have it at the same meal. With the tuna, 10% for iron. So it's in the middle. It's not at the 15, it's not a huge amount, it's not little, but it's in between. So hopefully this will just kind of help you gauge when you're looking at the label in the store, the iron content of the foods, and then also the vitamin C. Now, nutrition claims. This is something else. These are regulated as well by Health Canada, and they have to meet certain criteria. And they're optional and are found mostly on your canned goods. You won't find them on fruits and vegetables, just like you won't find the food labels on fruits and vegetables. But I find that this is always fascinating to read and learn about. And maybe it's because I'm a dietitian, but I find it interesting. So there are when you see source or high or good or very high or excellent, it has to fit certain criteria. And source means it contains a significant amount of the nutrient, but not a huge amount. High or good contains a high amount, and there are numbers associated with it, but I wasn't going to go into that today. Very high or excellent source, it contains a very high amount. They use it mostly for things that we're watching out for in a healthy diet. So they use it more for fiber, for vitamin C, as you saw the previous one, for fat, so from a perspective of no trans fat or low fat. So along with having high or good or very high, you have the same, there is also criteria for low or very low. More of this can also be found on the Health Canada website. So following food safety guidelines, the number one thing you must do is wash your hands. Wash your hands very well, and that goes across the board with not only food preparation, but throughout our activities of daily living. If we're shaking hands, if we're talking with people, we're always transmitting germs, and so it's very important to wash your hands. One of the more important things for us, though, is that we should avoid raw and undercooked seafood. So there's a high risk of food poisoning with something called Vibrio vulnificus, and it thrives in iron-rich blood, and cooking destroys this. So if you're having seafood, it's best to have it cooked, so best not to have sushi, and this is one of the specific ones that can be in iron-rich blood. And then following food safety guidelines, my favorite website is www.befoodsafe.ca, and on here they have a lot of different graphic depictions on food safety, which I think, depending on where you are or where you work, you might want to download and have it in your little kitchen there. So as you can see, I bolded the proper hand washing as being the most important. You also want to make sure you check expiry dates. You follow proper thawing techniques. So if you have frozen meat that you're going to have for dinner, you don't take it out and run it under hot water or leave it on your counter. You will put it in a pan and put it in the refrigerator and let it thaw out there. If you're short on time, you can also use the microwave, but if you're using the microwave, you have to take it right into cooking at that point. Bacteria loves to grow at room temperature as well, so it's very important to keep foods hot or cold foods cold. So hot foods hot, cold foods cold, and when in doubt, throw it out. So definitely if food has been sitting around for more than 2 hours, it's important to throw that out at room temperature. Or if you're having a lovely meal, we just had Thanksgiving, instead of having food sitting out, it would be a good idea to portion it and put it in the fridge. I know it's a bit of a pain to do that right away, but the longer food sits at room temperature, the more we need to be concerned about foodborne illness. And this pertains to any of us that are over 65, to pregnant women, and if we're immunosuppressed. So there was a comment about the neutropenic diet, and having done a lot of research on the neutropenic diet and the low microbial diet and the low bacteria diet over the years, there really isn't a need to be that strict. So there was a time many years ago when we talked about a sterile diet, and then we moved to low microbial or low bacteria, but there is no need to be that strict. What we found is most important is proper food safety guidelines. And what we found was that by having a diet, a low microbial diet, people were fixating on the specific foods and forgetting about the importance of food safety. So my advice to you is to focus more on the food safety. There are some specific foods to avoid, like I said, the raw fish, like sushi. There are some vegetables that are difficult to clean, and we do hear about the recalls from Health Canada, but for the most part, if you follow proper food safety guidelines, that should be sufficient. And Health Canada has them. We also have it on our UHN website. We have it for food safety for weakened immune systems if you want to look at that. Or, like I said, my favorite website, befoodsafe.ca. So before I embarked on this part of this presentation, I did connect with our pharmacist at the hospital as well. So if you are taking a multivitamin, check the package, and if there is iron in it, you might want to go to the pharmacist and ask her or him if she or he can recommend a product that does not have iron in it. And also, we talked about vitamin C rich foods. The same goes for vitamin C supplements. It can increase the body's absorption of iron, so it's best to avoid it. So in summary, we go back to the beginning. Follow a well-balanced and varied diet. By going through Canada's food guide, that's what we're talking about as being well-balanced, is following as well as you can the servings suggested on this and from each of the food groups. So that's what makes it well-balanced. So if you're a woman who's over 50, you're trying to have 7 vegetables and fruit per day, 6 grain products, 3 milk products, and a couple of meats. It sounds like a lot, but again, when you look at the portion size and you think about this being for all your meals and your snacks, it is not a lot. And if you think about omitting some of the foods that don't fall into this, like chips and chocolate and pop, then it does work out a bit better. Limit rich food sources of iron. We talked about heme iron, we talked about non-heme iron, we talked about plant-based foods that are iron rich, but they're not absorbed as easily. We talked about the combinations of not having vitamin C rich foods with foods of high rich in iron, but that it's okay to have tea because that can decrease the absorption. Avoid or limit alcohol, not much more to say about that. Follow food safety guidelines. I think you have that down pat. And we talked about vitamin and mineral supplements, using them cautiously. So then Health Canada, Eat Right Ontario is great as well. They have dietitians who work there. You can even ask them questions. Dietitians of Canada, if maybe you're looking for a private practice dietitian, Be Food Safe. I think you all know by now that that's my favorite website. And then we have the Canadian Food Inspection Agency if you want to know a little bit more about how foods are inspected in Canada. And that's it.